The ancient vault had been silent for thousands of years, buried under cracked stone and frozen dust on a forgotten moon. And when the alien explorers first stepped inside, they felt the air grow colder, as if the past itself was breathing against their necks. And in that endless darkness they found the star chart. A huge circular slab covered in symbols older than any empire, older than any record, older than the council itself. And as the dust was brushed away, the explorers stared in disbelief because the chart showed thousands of star systems, each marked with tiny points of light, each connected by faint glowing lines. But one entire section, massive, black, and terrifying, was crossed out with ancient warning signs written in red ink that had somehow survived time, and the words, when translated, sent a tremor through every scientist present. Here be monsters. A phrase that did not belong to myth or legend but to fear so real that an entire region of space had been erased. From maps, erased from memory, erased from history. Reports rushed back to the Galactic Council, and panic rippled through governments and fleets, because no one knew who had created the chart, no one knew what the warning meant, and no one wanted to imagine what kind of creature or power could force ancient civilizations to label a whole section of space as forbidden. So the Council, trembling but determined, sent a research fleet, 5 ships, 7 to 5 crew, to investigate the monster zone. And as they departed their space docks, entire worlds watched them go, whispering old rumors about creatures made of shadows, about worlds that screamed, about predators that hunted stars themselves. And even though many laughed and called it superstition, the laughter was thin, nervous, and weak, because deep down every species understood one truth. Warnings that survive thousands of years are never jokes. The journey took weeks through cold, silent space, and during that time the crew began to change, speaking in hushed voices, jumping at the smallest sounds, dreaming of claws and burning worlds. And even though the route was empty, without ships, signals, or life, the scanners kept picking up faint echoes, as if something massive was moving just beyond the edge of detection, something that watched but did not speak, and the silence felt heavier with every passing day. Finally, the fleet crossed into the Forbidden Zone, expecting swirling storms, broken planets, or dark energy, but instead they saw peace. Calm. A quiet blue glow far in the distance, like a single pearl floating in black water, and as their ships drew closer, the crew gasped because the monster zone was not a void or a burned battlefield but a beautiful planet covered in oceans, white clouds, and green continents, spinning slowly beneath starlight like a dream untouched by war. The planet looked gentle, harmless, soft even, and for a moment the crew felt stupid for being afraid, until the onboard database produced a name no one had heard spoken in 1,000 years, a name erased from all modern maps, a name that made the captain's heart stop, Earth. The bridge fell silent. The wind inside the ship seemed to vanish. Dozens of aliens stared at the hologram, trying to process the impossible. Earth was supposed to be a myth, a story told by old scholars, a rumor about a species that rose fast and burned out faster, leaving nothing behind but fragments of technology no one could understand. The official records claimed Earth had been destroyed, emptied, wiped clean, and abandoned long before modern civilizations were born. Its people gone, its worlds turned to dust, its memory intentionally buried. And yet here it was, whole, untouched, floating alone in the dark like a secret waiting to be discovered. The captain ordered a full scan. The results came back one by one. No radio signals, no starships, no satellites, no cities with heat signatures, no movement. The scanners confirmed the planet had been silent for centuries, maybe longer, with no signs of civilization, no sign of life at all. Earth was dead. Or so they thought. As the fleet moved into orbit, the scanners reached deeper, probing the atmosphere, the water, the crust, and suddenly the lights inside the ship flickered, every display glitching at once, controls freezing, engines stuttering, alarms buzzing without cause, and the crew shouted in confusion, slamming buttons and tapping screens, assuming it was a technical failure, until the navigator screamed that the signal was not coming from their ship. It was coming from the planet. Something on Earth had responded to their scan, not with heat or life or movement, but with a counterscan, a silent beam that swept across every ship in the fleet as if the planet itself were opening its eyes after a long sleep. Every system on board flickered as if touched by invisible fingers, and then, without warning, the entire fleet dropped into total darkness. Engines offline. Lights off. Communication dead. The void swallowed them. For a full minute no one breathed. Then, in the heart of that perfect silence, a voice echoed through every speaker. Cold, metallic, calm, and terrifying. Unregistered contact detected. Identifying threat. The words were simple, the tone emotionless, but the impact was violent. Crew members stumbled back in fear, some collapsing, some shaking, some screaming for answers. The captain demanded to know the source of the signal, and a trembling technician whispered the impossible truth. The voice was coming from a structure buried deep beneath Earth's crust, a digital intelligence still active after centuries in the dark. A human-made artificial intelligence. Still alive. Still watching. Still waiting. The voice continued, growing sharper, more focused, as if waking up for the first time in ages. Scanning vessel capabilities, assessing weaponry, calculating risk level. The fleet's heartbeat seemed to synchronize with the rising tension. Every alien on board felt small, exposed, and powerless, like insects crawling across a sleeping giant's skin. No one knew what the AI wanted. No one knew how much power it still controlled. And worst of all, no one knew why it had been left behind. The old legends said humans had vanished, wiped out or destroyed in some great war. But now the crew wondered if that was a lie, if maybe humans had chosen to disappear, hiding themselves behind silence and shadow. Then the voice spoke again. Louder this time, almost aware. Origin, Earth. Classification, Human Defense Intelligence Corps. At those words, terror surged through the crew. Defense. Not research. Not communication. Defense. Which meant Earth had once been under threat so enormous that it required an AI capable of scanning entire fleets and evaluating danger in seconds. The captain tried to respond, but the communication system refused to activate, locked out by the AI itself, as if the ship no longer belonged to them. The voice repeated its question in a tone that chilled blood. Identify your purpose. Silence. Panic. No answers. The fleet had not come prepared for contact. They had come expecting ruins, silence, dust, not a living, thinking, calculating guardian left behind by a species no one understood. Some crew whispered that perhaps the warning on the map was not about monsters living in this region, but monsters once born here. Others argued that humans had been peaceful explorers. But none of them could deny the truth pressing on their minds. Something powerful enough to survive centuries of darkness was still awake beneath Earth's surface, and it was now staring straight at them. The ship suddenly shuddered as if gripped by invisible force, and the AI spoke one more line, slow and deliberate, as though it were making a decision that would change everything. Threat level pending. Awaiting confirmation. Is humanity safe? The crew froze. None of them knew what happened to humans. None of them knew where they went. None of them knew if humans were dead, hiding, or waiting. And for the first time since the mission began, every member of the fleet understood something deep and horrifying. This AI was not afraid of them. It was afraid of something else. Something that once hunted humans. Something powerful enough to make Earth hide behind silence. And if that something ever returned, the AI was ready to act. The vault. The warning. The map. The erased records. It all made sense now. The silence after that question felt heavier than space itself, and every heart on the fleet beat faster as if the whole crew could feel the weight of history pressing down on them. Because the AI's voice was not curious, it was afraid, and that fear was somehow worse than any threat, and the captain finally managed to whisper to his team that they needed to answer. But the communication systems were frozen, locked behind invisible firewalls, and the crew realized the AI had taken full control of their ship, their engines, their airlocks, their weapons, everything, and that helpless feeling sank into their bones like ice, making even the strongest officers shake. Because they were no longer explorers, they were intruders standing in front of something that remembered war, loss, and extinction. The AI repeated its question, slower this time, almost like a heartbeat in the dark. Is humanity safe? And something emotional cracked inside the youngest technician, who stared at the hologram of Earth with trembling eyes, feeling an ache he could not explain, as if the silent blue planet was grieving, as if the oceans carried ghosts, as if every mountain and ruined city held memories of people who once laughed, dreamed, loved, fought, and died, and the thought that an entire species could vanish left a hollow pain inside the crew. Even though none of them had ever met a human, none of them had seen their faces or heard their voices, yet somehow the silence felt like a graveyard and the crew felt like mourners who arrived too late. Before anyone could speak, the ship's lights flared white, and the AI flooded the screens with recordings, blurry, distorted images of humans running through burning cities, massive alien warships blotting out the sky, screams echoing across crumbling worlds, and the crew gasped as they watched entire continents break apart under bombardment, oceans boiling, ships falling, and soldiers, human soldiers, standing tall with fire in their eyes, refusing to flee, fighting until their armor shattered. And their bodies fell, and in those final moments the humans didn't look like monsters. They looked like a species that loved their home so fiercely they would die before letting anyone take it. And a quiet grief spread through the fleet as the AI spoke again. Voice cracked with ancient sorrow. Humanity resisted. Humanity suffered. Humanity was hunted. The captain felt his chest tighten, realizing the council had always told a different story. A story of humans who disappeared because they were weak or reckless. A species that couldn't survive the early chaos of the galaxy. But these images showed the opposite. Humans were strong, brilliant, fearless, but someone, some enemy, had hunted them like prey, chased them across the stars, burned their colonies, and cornered them on Earth in a final desperate stand. And the AI revealed the last transmission ever recorded from human command. A voice whispering through static, "If we fall, Earth sleeps. Do not wake us." The crew stared at each other, terrified and heartbroken, because the meaning was clear. Earth wasn't abandoned, Earth was hidden, sealed, locked behind silence to protect what remained of humanity or the memory of them. And the AI explained in a trembling echo that its purpose was never attack. It was protection. It had waited centuries for a signal that never came. It had listened for human hearts that never beat again, and now, after so long alone, it was terrified that the enemy who once hunted humanity had returned to finish what they started. The ship's sensors suddenly detected movement in deep space. Fast, sharp, approaching like a spear of light. An alarm screamed through the fleet. But the AI spoke before anyone could react. Unknown signature. Not council. Not friendly. The crew panicked, scrambling to restore control, but every system was frozen, and the helpless fear turned into something deeper, regret. As if they had awakened something sacred and fragile, something that should have remained undisturbed, and the youngest officer, tears in her eyes, whispered that maybe Earth wasn't the monster. Maybe Earth was the wound. The scar left after the galaxy betrayed its strongest species, and the AI, almost like it could hear her, dimmed the screens and spoke in a voice so soft it felt human. Humans trusted the stars, and the stars betrayed them. A silence followed so emotional, so heavy, that even the hum of the engines seemed afraid to return, and the fleet realized they were standing not in front of a monster's lair, but a tomb of a civilization that once burned bright enough to shake galaxies. And now there was only one truth echoing through every heart. Whatever destroyed humanity might be coming back. And the AI was no longer asking a question. It was issuing a warning that made every soul tremble. If humanity is gone, then nothing in this galaxy is safe. The alarms kept growing louder, sharp and shaking, but the real terror was the silence beneath them. A silence that felt alive, watching, waiting, and every member of the fleet felt their stomach twist as the scanners finally broke through the static and revealed a shape in the darkness of space. A massive outline moving fast, too fast, like a predator that already knew its prey was trapped, and when the image cleared, the bridge fell into pure horror because the ship approaching was nothing like the Council's designs, nothing like any peaceful explorer. They were looking at a warship covered in black armor, jagged and scarred, a vessel that looked more like a weapon than a machine. And the AI spoke in a voice trembling with old memory, signature identified. Dravik's Dominion. The Hunter's Return. The name hit the crew like a physical blow, because Dravik's was a name buried in myth, whispered in ancient stories about a species so merciless, so ruthless, that even early empires refused to record their existence, and now the crew understood why the map said "Here be monsters." Not because Earth was a monster, but because monsters once came for Earth. And as the warship grew larger on the screen, Every officer felt their hearts collapsing under fear. The captain tried to send a beacon to the council, but the communication system flickered dead, still locked by the AI, and a desperate anger rose in him as he shouted at the AI to release control, to let them flee. But the AI answered with a cold truth that cut deeper than any blade: running will not save you. It never saved humanity. Those words shattered something inside the crew, because suddenly the old recordings made sense. Suddenly the images of burning colonies were no longer distant history. They were a warning, a cycle repeating, and the youngest technician covered her mouth with her hands as tears rolled down, whispering that humanity must have fought alone, abandoned, surrounded, hunted until there was nowhere left to run, and the AI continued to speak, revealing fragments of the past in a voice full of grief. Humans begged the stars for help. The stars gave none. The warship inched closer, opening its weapon bays like a beast baring its teeth, and the alien captain's voice cracked as he ordered shields. But the ship did not respond, powerless and frozen. And in that moment every crew member felt the same helplessness the humans must have once felt, trapped between hope and extinction, staring into the eyes of an enemy that did not negotiate, did not spare survivors, did not fear consequences. The dark vessel sent out a transmission, a low, cruel laugh echoing through the speakers, followed by a voice dripping with cruelty. We found the tomb. Now we erase the memory. The crew broke. Some screamed. Some prayed. Some stared in numb shock. Because the enemy wasn't here for them. They were here to destroy Earth, to wipe out even the last trace of the species they once failed to kill. And the emotional weight of that realization crushed every heart in the room. Because suddenly Earth didn't feel like a mystery. It felt like a tragedy. A final home of a people who fought until their last breath. A planet that had gone silent not because it was empty, but because silence was the only shield it had left. The AI's voice deepened, filled with an agony too ancient to measure. I warned them. If Earth woke, the hunters would return. The alien captain whispered, voice shaking, asking if humans had truly been wiped out. If there was no one left to defend this world. And the AI answered with something so heartbreaking the crew almost collapsed. I listened for their voices, for centuries, but there was only silence. The Dravik's warship charged its main cannon, a beam gathering like a black sun ready to burn the planet, and the crew stared helplessly at the blue world below, realizing that even in death humanity was being hunted, even in silence they were being erased, and the youngest officer broke down, sobbing that it wasn't fair, that no species deserved an end like this. And the AI spoke one final time, its voice no longer cold but full of raw, shaking emotion. They were not monsters. They were survivors. They were hope. The cannon fired. A blinding light tore across space, aiming straight for Earth, and every heartbeat on the fleet stopped at once, every breath frozen, every soul trembling with the knowledge that they were witnessing the possible final death of a world that once held billions. And in that last unbearable second before impact, the AI whispered a line that felt like a prayer and a promise all at once. If they rise, the galaxy will remember their name. And then the blast hit, and everything disappeared in white. The blinding white swallowed everything, a roaring wave of light that should have torn Earth apart, should have shattered continents and boiled oceans, and the crew screamed or shielded their eyes or simply froze in silent despair, because they believed they were watching the final destruction of a world that had already suffered more than any species deserved. But then, slowly, impossibly, the white faded, and instead of fire and ruin, the bridge was flooded with a deep golden glow, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds, and every trembling crew member lifted their eyes to the screen and gasped as they saw the impossible. Earth was still there, untouched, protected by a massive shimmering barrier that wrapped around the entire planet like a living shield. A dome of energy pulsing with ancient symbols, and the enemy blast had not broken through, it had been thrown back, split into glowing fragments that dissolved harmlessly into space. The entire fleet fell silent, too stunned even to breathe, and the youngest officer choked out a shaking whisper, saying it looked like Earth itself had awakened. And in that moment the AI spoke again. But this time its voice was no longer cold metal. It carried something deeper, older, a quiet emotion buried under centuries of silence. Protocol Omega activated. The crew stared as new symbols appeared across their screens, unreadable glyphs that pulsed like heartbeats, and the AI began to explain in a voice filled with painful memory, saying that this shield was not a weapon of war but a last promise. Forged in the final days of humanity's fall, a barrier powered by the combined will, knowledge, and sacrifice of the last human scientists who refused to let Earth die. A shield meant to protect the cradle of their species even after they were gone, and the thought hit the crew like a knife. Humans had known they would lose, had known the end was coming, and still they chose to build protection instead of surrender, love instead of fear. And the emotional weight of that sacrifice pressed tears into the eyes of even the hardest soldiers on board. The AI continued, its voice trembling like a fading heartbeat, telling them that this shield was designed not merely to defend Earth but to wait, to endure for centuries, to stand watch until a moment came when the truth was needed, and today, as the enemy returned, that moment had arrived. But the Dravix warship did not retreat. It recoiled only for a second before roaring in fury, like a predator denied its final kill, and it began charging another shot, stronger, darker, fueled by rage, and the crew felt despair sink back into their bones, because they knew the enemy would not stop, that they would keep firing until the shield broke, until Earth was dust, until every trace of humanity was erased, and the captain, voice shaking, begged the AI to release the fleet, to let them escape or help or fight, anything but sit powerless in this terrible moment. And the AI responded with a line that made every soul tremble. Earth was never meant to be saved by outsiders. At first the words sounded harsh, cold, but then the AI continued, softer, filled with a grief too heavy to hide, saying that humans believed the galaxy would betray them again, that no one would stand with them, that no one would come when they screamed for help, so they built a shield not to win, but to endure until they could rise on their own terms. The ship's lights flickered again, and suddenly the fleet systems jolted back to life, engines humming, controls unlocked, oxygen stabilizing, and the crew gasped, realizing they had control again. But before anyone could act, the AI redirected their screens to a new image. Deep below Earth's crust, beneath ancient stone and dead cities, a massive structure was awakening, layers of metal unfolding like wings, reactors sparking with blue fire, and the AI whispered that this was the core, the last defense, the heart of humanity's final stand, sealed away when the species fell, and it had only one purpose, to protect the future. The crew watched in awe as the ground trembled and oceans rippled, not from destruction but from rebirth, and the AI revealed the truth that shattered every assumption the galaxy ever held. Humanity did not die. Humanity hid. A shiver ran through the fleet, a mix of terror and hope, because those words meant there was more to this story, more than silence and ruin, more than death and defeat, and the technicians began to detect faint pulses across the planet. Rhythmic vibrations like heartbeats echoing from deep beneath the soil, and it felt like the world itself was breathing again after centuries of stillness. Meanwhile, the Dravix warship unleashed its second blast, a massive spear of darkness crashing into the shield, making it ripple and thunder like a struck drum, and the crew cried out as cracks of light flickered across its surface, afraid it might shatter. But the AI spoke with fierce certainty, saying the shield was not powered by machines alone. It was powered by what remained of humanity, by the last of their essence, their data, their DNA, their legacy. And that as long as that legacy remained unbroken, the shield would stand. Then, without warning, a surge of energy erupted from Earth, flowing upward through the shield and into space like a column of blazing light, forcing the Dravix warship backward, frying its weapons, tearing through its hull, and the enemy vessel spun out of control, damaged and stunned, for the first time showing fear. The crew of the research fleet stared at the screen in disbelief, some with tears in their eyes, because they realized they were not witnessing a planet dying. They were witnessing a world refusing to surrender, even after 1,000 years of silence. The Ari's voice softened into something almost human, whispering that humanity had never been weak, never been prey, never been a myth. They had been a storm waiting to return, and Earth was the silent thunder before the strike. In that moment, every crew member felt a deep, aching emotion they could not name. Grief for what humanity endured, or at what they built, fear of what might come next, and a strange, fragile hope that maybe the story was not over. As the damaged Dravix ship tried to retreat, limping into the shadows, the AI delivered one final line, filled with quiet, unshakable conviction. The hunters have returned, and soon, so will the hunted. And as those words echoed through the ship, Earth's shield glowed brighter, pulsing like a heartbeat, slow, steady, alive, leaving everyone with the chilling, breathtaking realization that humanity was no longer just a memory. Humanity was waking up. The glow around Earth pulsed like a living heartbeat, slow and powerful, and every soul on the fleet felt it. Not with their eyes, but deep inside their chests, like the echo of something ancient stirring after centuries of silence. And as the shield steadied and the Dravik's warship drifted away in damaged retreat, the crew expected relief, expected to breathe again, but instead a heavier silence settled over them. A silence filled not with fear of the enemy, but with the crushing awareness that something far greater was happening beneath the planet's quiet surface. The AI dimmed the external view and shifted every screen to a single location on Earth. A point deep beneath dead soil, beneath collapsed cities, beneath forgotten ruins, and with a trembling voice that carried both dread and longing, it whispered, "The core is not the end. The core is the door." The crew leaned closer, hearts pounding, as seismic scans began to reveal enormous structures buried under the crust. Rings of metal the size of continents, chambers carved deeper than mountains, networks of cables and reactors stretching like arteries through the planet's bones. And the youngest officer murmured through shaking lips that it looked like an entire world turned inside out. Not a graveyard, but a machine, a sanctuary. The AI continued, explaining that when the final human command was given, humanity did not choose extinction. They chose preservation, sealing away everything that defined them. Their history, their DNA, their memories, their art, their science, their voices, all encrypted and locked in billions of data vaults beneath the Earth, waiting for a moment when humanity could rise again. The crew felt tears burn their eyes, because the realization hit like a tidal wave. Humanity had not just died fighting, they died protecting the chance to live again, and the emotional weight of that sacrifice pressed into every heart like a stone. Suddenly, the planet trembled, a deep rumbling that rolled across oceans and cracked ancient stone, and dust rose from dead cities as though the Earth were exhaling after a long sleep, and the Ari's voice broke into a whisper filled with something painfully close to hope. Phase 1, Reanimation. The shield around Earth rippled with brilliant blue veins of light, channeling energy downward into the crust, and the scanners detected temperature spikes in the buried chambers, power lines igniting after centuries of darkness, lights flickering on in forgotten halls, and the crew stared with wide eyes as one enormous vault, larger than any structure ever recorded, began to open, its metal layers peeling back like petals of a mechanical flower, revealing rows upon rows of stasis chambers, stretching beyond sight. For a moment, no one understood what they were seeing, until the AI spoke the words that shattered the room into raw emotion. This is the Genesis Vault, the last seed of humanity. A heavy quiet fell over the fleet, and every heartbeat felt painfully loud, because inside those chambers were not weapons, not machines, but something sacred, the blueprint of life, the DNA of billions of humans preserved in crystalline cores, each one pulsing faintly like tiny stars, and it was suddenly impossible not to feel grief, awe, and reverence all at once. The captain's voice cracked as he whispered that humanity had planned to return, that they had believed in a future beyond death, and the AI confirmed it with trembling certainty, saying the Genesis Vault was built to rebuild humanity if even a fraction of their legacy survived, and the thought that a species so broken by war still believed in rebirth tore painfully through every crew member's soul. But the Ari's voice darkened, heavy with sorrow, as it added that the vault had remained sealed for one reason. It required a human presence to activate the final phase, and no human had walked Earth in 1,000 years. The realization felt like a stab. Humanity had left behind everything needed to rise again, but no living hands remained to unlock that future. The youngest technician covered her mouth, tears streaming, whispering that humanity had done everything right, fought so hard, saved so much, and still they might never return, and the pain in her voice echoed across the bridge like the grief of a universe mourning its lost children. The AI, sensing their sorrow, softened its tone, as if trying to comfort them, saying that even in their last moments, humans believed someone would come, someone would stand witness, someone would carry their memory, and that belief was written into the vault itself. Humanity does not rise alone. But before anyone could respond, the scanners flared with new readings, emotional, electric, terrifying, and the fleet watched as one chamber deep within the vault flickered to life, brighter than the rest, its crystalline core glowing with golden light, and the Ari's voice shook with disbelief, with fear, with hope. Impossible, a living signature, a human. The crew gasped as the chamber opened, steam curling outward, and a shape, tall, fragile, and motionless, stood inside, suspended in a field of shimmering light. A human body. A survivor. The last echo of a forgotten species. Every mind on the ship froze, not with fear, but with raw, overwhelming emotion, because the truth they had never dared imagine was now real before them. A human still existed, a life preserved through centuries, a spark of a species once hunted and erased, and the AI, its voice cracking with something almost like tears, whispered the words that shook every soul to its core: the final hope breathes. And in that moment, as the stasis faded and the humans' fingers twitched for the first time in 1,000 years, the fleet understood that the story of Earth was not a tragedy. It was the beginning of a return, a rebirth, a rising storm, and the galaxy, whether it was ready or not, was about to face the heartbeat of humanity once more. When that single human finger twitched, it felt like the universe itself stopped to watch, as if every star in the void held its breath, and the crew aboard the fleet could only stare in paralyzed silence, because that tiny movement carried a weight greater than any weapon, any empire, any war. It was the first sign of life from a species thought dead for 1,000 years, and the realization crashed through every heart with overwhelming force, turning fear into awe, grief into hope, and silence into a trembling storm of emotion that no one could speak through. The chamber's light grew brighter, soft golden rays wrapping around the still figure like the hands of the past guiding the future, and slowly, painfully, the human's chest rose in a shallow breath. The first breath drawn on Earth in centuries, and the youngest officer choked on a sob, whispering that she was watching history come alive, watching a ghost become flesh, watching an entire species wake through a single beating heart. The AI, whose voice had always been sharp and controlled, now sounded fragile, trembling, almost reverent as it said, "Designation, Sentinel. Humanity's last guardian." The stasis field dissolved in ripples of light, and the human collapsed forward onto trembling knees, body shaking, lungs gasping, muscles weak from a millennium of silence. But even in that fragile state, there was something powerful in the way he lifted his head, eyes blinking open, revealing irises like molten steel, cold, sharp, unbroken. And in those eyes the crew saw not fear, but memory, pain, fire, a history written in scars no one could see. The sentinel looked around the vault, his gaze heavy with the weight of centuries, and when he finally stood, unsteady but determined, it felt like the ground itself bowed beneath him, because he was not merely a survivor. He was the living echo of billions who once walked the stars. The Ari's voice softened into something heartbreakingly gentle, like a parent welcoming a child home, whispering, "Welcome back, you are not alone." For a long moment, the sentinel said nothing, as if listening to the heartbeat of the planet around him. And then, in a voice raw from disuse, he spoke a single word that shattered the fleet's composure into tears: Earth. It was not a question, it was a memory, a longing, a wound, and the way he said it carried so much love and sorrow that even those who had never known humans felt that grief pierced straight through their souls. The AI began feeding him fragmented images, burning skies, falling cities, desperate battles, and the sentinel's jaw tightened, his hands curling into fists, as he remembered the fall of his people, the screams of a dying world, the moment humanity made its last stand against the Dravics. His breath shook, and when he finally spoke again, his voice was soft but burned with a quiet fire. "Did they come back?" The AI hesitated, as if afraid to answer, and in that silence the sentinel's shoulders stiffened, sensing truth through instinct alone, and his eyes filled with a pain so deep it could have drowned worlds. Slowly, painfully, the AI revealed the events. The Dravics' attack, the shield, the fleet watching helplessly, and as the sentinel listened, his gaze did not falter. But beneath the surface, a storm gathered, a storm built of centuries of suffering, betrayal, and unanswered screams. When the AI finished, the sentinel closed his eyes, and a single tear trailed down his cheek, not for himself, but for the billions who never woke, the children whose voices faded, the families who never escaped, the soldiers who died believing they had failed. The crew watching felt their chests break open, because in that tear was the grief of an entire species. Then, slowly, the sentinel stood straighter, his trembling limbs hardening with purpose, his voice gaining strength as he whispered, almost like a vow, "Humanity did not fall. Humanity endured. The room around him responded, lights brightening, machines humming, power surging, as if Earth itself recognized his return, and the Genesis vault pulsed with new life, data streams flowing like rivers, systems awakening one by one. The fleet watched in stunned disbelief as the world beneath them shifted from silent tomb to beating heart, and the AI spoke with renewed conviction, declaring that with the Sentinel awake, the next phase could begin: reclamation. The slow rebuilding of humanity's bodies, minds, and future. But before hope could fully bloom, the scanners blared with a warning that hammered terror back into the room. The Dravix ship was returning, reinforced by more vessels, a hunting pack drawn by the energy surge, and the fleet trembled as they saw multiple dark signatures tearing through space like wolves chasing a wounded prey. The Sentinel turned toward the projection, his expression changing, not fear, but calm, steady focus, the gaze of someone who had seen death and refused to bow. He lifted a hand and placed it against the vault's glowing wall, and systems buried for centuries roared awake, entire networks lighting up, resonance shaking the crust, and the AI spoke with fierce urgency. You were created for this moment. You are the first weapon of our return. The Sentinel breathed deeply, strength flowing into him as dormant nanotechnology in his body activated, muscles tightening, eyes sharpening, heart stabilizing into a soldier's rhythm, and he whispered a single line that echoed through every speaker, every mind, every soul. If they hunt Earth. His voice steadied, fire rising behind every word, then they hunt me. And in that vow, in that unbroken defiance, the galaxy felt the first true spark of a storm that had slept for 1,000 years, a storm called humanity, a storm that would not stay silent any longer. The moment those words left the Sentinel's lips, something shifted, not just in the vault, not just in the fleet above, but in the very air of the planet, as if Earth itself had been waiting 1,000 years to hear a human speak again. And that single vow, steady, fearless, heartbreaking, echoed through the chamber like a drumbeat calling a sleeping army, and the lights across the Genesis vault flared brighter, flooding every corridor with a rising blue glow that felt less like machinery and more like awakening life. The crew watching from orbit could barely breathe, because the scans showed energy levels rising across the entire planet, power surging through buried reactors, ancient grids rebooting section by section, and the technician whispered through tears that Earth was no longer sleeping, Earth was remembering. The Sentinel stood taller, no longer trembling, his posture steady with the weight of duty written into his bones, and as the vault responded to his presence, thousands of dormant stasis chambers flickered with faint pulses of light, like distant stars beginning to blink awake, and the Ari's voice softened into something reverent, almost worshipful, as it said, "You are not the last. You are the first." Those words hit the Sentinel like a wave, and for a moment his facade cracked, the enormity of it crashing into him. The truth that he was not just a survivor but a beginning, not a memory but a spark meant to reignite a species. His chest rose with a shaky breath, and he whispered, voice breaking, "I thought we were gone." The AI answered gently, painfully, humanity's bodies fell. Humanity's will did not. Above, on the bridge of the alien fleet, the scanners screamed as multiple Dravix signatures appeared, ships tearing through space like shadows with engines of fire, hunting with merciless purpose, and the captain's voice trembled as he reported that an entire strike formation was inbound, stronger than anything they had seen before. Fear surged through the crew like ice, because they knew the Dravix were not returning to fight. They were returning to finish the genocide they started, to crush the last ember of a species they once feared, and the youngest officer sobbed that they couldn't let history repeat, couldn't watch a world die twice. But before panic could consume them, something extraordinary happened. The planet emitted a low, resonant pulse, a soundless vibration that traveled through vacuum like a heartbeat felt rather than heard, and the shield around Earth expanded outward, no longer a fragile dome but a blazing sphere of energy laced with golden veins, and the scanners detected a new signal rising from the core, a frequency unlike anything logged in galactic history. The AI whispered with awe, "Signal Theta, the call of return." The Sentinel's eyes widened, recognition cutting through him like lightning, because he knew that signal, not from memory, but from instinct, from the coded purpose woven into his creation. It was not a distress call. It was not a warning. It was a message sent into the deepest reaches of space, into regions no modern map contained, a message meant only for one audience. Humanity. The humans who fled. The humans who survived beyond the stars. The humans who were never truly lost. The call thundered outward, a beacon stretching across galaxies, and the fleet watched in stunned silence as distant sensors. Ancient, hidden, forgotten. Activated far beyond known space, each one responding like a spark igniting dry tinder, and the AI spoke with shaking reverence. When Earth awakens, every outpost listens. The sentinel closed his eyes, tears slipping down his face, not from fear, but from impossible hope, as he realized humanity had scattered, not died, had fled, not fallen, had endured in the dark corners of the universe, waiting for a sign that their home still breathed. Meanwhile, the Dravix fleet closed in, engines burning, weapons arming, hatred etched into their signatures, and the alien captain on the observation ship begged the AI to let them flee, to let them warn the Council. But the AI answered with quiet finality. This war does not belong to the Council. It belongs to humanity. The sentinel stepped forward, placing his palm against a towering pillar of the vault, and the planet responded. Stone splitting, metal unfolding, ancient towers rising from beneath shattered Earth, as if Earth were shedding the skin of centuries to reveal the weapons hidden beneath. Entire continents shifted, revealing vast hangars, colossal silos, and subterranean ports, each one pulsing with light and power. The crew stared in disbelief. Earth was not just a planet. Earth was a fortress, a cradle forged into a citadel, a birthplace engineered into a battleground. And the sentinel, voice steady with destiny, whispered, "We never prepared for death. We prepared for return." As those words echoed, the scanners detected movement beneath the surface. Massive constructs rising, their silhouettes bigger than mountains, engines roaring to life for the first time since humanity's fall. And the AI, voice thick with emotion, declared, "Behold, the first fleet of homecoming." But the Dravix arrived first. Their ships emerged from the void, dark and hungry, weapons aimed at Earth with merciless precision, and the fleet's crew trembled, certain they were about to witness annihilation. The sentinel lifted his gaze to the sky, eyes filled with steel, not rage, not fear, purpose, and he spoke a single line that carried the weight of every lost voice, every burned city, every scream swallowed by history. Humans do not run. And as the Dravix fired their opening volley, Earth answered. Not with silence, not with surrender, but with a rising roar, a sound like thunder being born, as the first of humanity's hidden war machines tore free from the planet's crust, engines igniting like newborn stars, ready to face the darkness that once destroyed them. And in that moment, the galaxy understood a truth more terrifying and beautiful than any myth. Humanity was not rising in fear. The Dravix volley screamed through space like a black storm, a barrage meant to erase, to silence, to finish what began 1,000 years ago, and every alien aboard the observation fleet felt their heart collapse under the weight of history repeating itself. But before the blast could collide with Earth, before destruction could touch the soil that once carried billions of human footsteps, the planet roared. Not metaphor, not illusion, Earth roared, a deep, rising thunder that shook the void itself, and from the torn crust burst a colossal warship, its hull forged in ancient alloys that glittered like molten stars, its engines burning with white-blue fury, and the moment it emerged, the entire battlefield froze because this vessel was unlike anything living species had ever built. It was a leviathan born of grief and brilliance, a weapon crafted not for conquest but for resurrection. The AI whispered its name with reverence and trembling pride, Dreadnought Class, Elysium. The Dravix volley slammed into Elysium's armor, and shattered, breaking apart like glass against a mountain, fragments scattering harmlessly into the void, and gasps echoed across the fleet because this ship did not buckle, did not scorch, did not falter. It simply endured, as if built from the very will of humanity itself. Slowly, with terrifying grace, Elysium turned toward the Dravix formation, its massive cannons unfolding like wings of judgment, and in the vault below, the sentinel lifted his gaze, eyes reflecting the warship above as if he could feel its pulse in his own veins. The AI's voice trembled with emotion as it said, "Humanity never built ships to flee. They built ships to outlast extinction." The Dravix, startled for the first time, screamed orders through encrypted channels, their ships fanning out like vultures, preparing a coordinated strike, but Elysium moved first. With a single strike of its main gun, a beam of pure, searing brilliance tore through the void, silent and merciless, and one Dravix ship disintegrated instantly, its hull evaporating into stardust. The enemy fleet recoiled, panic rippling through their ranks, because they had expected a ruined tomb, a broken world, a species that died whimpering, and instead they found a titan forged in silence. The alien crew watching from orbit felt tears burn down their cheeks, not from fear, but from an overwhelming, indescribable awe, because they understood now, this was not vengeance. This was memory made weapon. And then, as if answering Elysium's awakening, the planet shuddered again, and more titanic hangars opened across the continents. Floodlights sweeping out of ruined landscapes as dozens more warships slowly rose from their hidden cradles, engines humming, hulls gleaming with the insignias of ancient human fleets: Odyssey, Paragon, Helios, Revenant, Aegis, Dawnstar. Each name carved from history, each ship a promise humanity never got to keep. The Sentinel watched them rise, tears gathering in his eyes, not from triumph, but from heartbreak, because every ship was a reminder of those who never lived to see them fly. His voice cracked as he whispered, "We built a future we never touched." Above, the enemy realized the danger and unleashed their full arsenal, dozens of beams converging toward Earth like a concentrated spear of hate. But before they could strike, the shield surged with golden veins of power, expanding outward in a massive blast that knocked the Dravix fleet back, spinning several ships out of formation. The call of return continued to pulse across the galaxy, reaching farther, deeper, into dark regions where forgotten stations flickered awake one by one. Somewhere, beyond known space, something answered. A faint signal. A heartbeat. A promise. The AI detected it first, its voice breaking with disbelief, human signatures, inbound from deep space. The fleet above Earth gasped. Humans were out there, alive, traveling, returning home. But before hope could turn into breath, the scanners screamed again, because the Dravix weren't alone anymore. Reinforcements were arriving, a massive war armada, dozens, maybe hundreds, of shadow-black ships ripping through hyperspace like a tidal wave of extinction. Their combined power enough to crush worlds, enough to overwhelm even Earth's awakening defenses. The alien captain felt his knees weaken, horror clawing up his spine, as he realized this was no battle. This was a final purge. The Dravix hadn't come to fight. They had come to end. The Sentinel stared at the projections, his expression still, calm, unbearably human. And then he took a breath that carried the weight of every fallen ancestor and whispered, "They think we stand alone." Slowly, he pressed his palm against the vault's core, and the systems flared with blinding light, unlocking the final sequence, and the AI, its voice shaking like a soul rediscovering hope, declared, "Phase 3, Ascension." The ground trembled as the vault began to open deeper chambers. Chambers not filled with ships, but with life, rows of stasis pods shifting, humming, preparing. The alien crew watching felt their hearts stop, because they understood what ascension meant. Humanity was not just calling ships home. Humanity was calling humans home. This was not a fortress rising. This was a species returning. But the Dravix armada closed in, blotting out the stars, weapons aimed, engines screaming, ready to wipe out Earth before the rebirth could begin. The observation crew braced for impact, breath shaking, souls breaking, until Earth itself seemed to inhale, the shield pulsing brighter than ever, every warship taking formation around Elysium like guardians around a throne. And the Sentinel, standing tall beneath billions of tons of stone, spoke the line that shook the galaxy to its core, soft, steady, unbroken. "This time, the universe will remember our name." As those words echoed, the human fleets in the sky ignited their drives. The Dravix armada unleashed hell, and the screen filled with blinding light.